Hey there YouTube, SU here. Today we have a short and sweet one for you guys because in this video I'm going to be talking about RAM Rekka cancels. A question I get in my chat pretty much every day at this point is asking me, how do I do RAM Rekka cancels? Do you have any tips? How do I do Rekka Loops? It's something that is in my chat all the time, so I figured it'd be a good idea to just make a video on it. That way I can just kind of reference people to that video. I just know in general a lot of RAM players struggle with it, whether they're newer to the character or not. So in this video, we're going to be talking about Rekka cancels. I'm going to give some tips on how you can get better at them, and then we'll talk about Rekka Loops a little bit near the end. Of course, when I'm talking about Rekka cancels, I am referring to the fact that Ram can essentially special cancel her Rekka into other special moves, and most importantly, cancel her Rekka into itself. Her Rekka, of course, being 214P in this case. This is a little bit awkward because it's not a traditional special cancel. You're not just canceling the Rekka into a special move. With Ram, both her Rekka 1 and her Rekka 2, they have a dash cancel. So you can just dash cancel them. And it's the same for both of them. And from this dash cancel, you can special cancel the initial part of the dash into a special move. So something like that. It's not a traditional special cancel. And you can't cancel the later frames of the dash either. It has to be specifically the first 2 frames of your dash cancel, which means that there's a bit of an execution barrier to this. It is not super straightforward. If you are someone, I just want to mention this real quick, if you are somebody that's like maybe wondering, like, do you have the execution to play Ram, or maybe you're just getting into her and this is like maybe kind of alarming to you, don't worry about it. It's not something you need to know for the character. It's more of like the icing on top. It's something you can just kind of learn whatever you want to. They are fun to do and they are useful, but it's not necessary to the character by any means, so don't worry about that. So we need to talk about the actual process of inputting this, right? How do we go from Rekka into dash cancel into a special move? And in my head, there are 2 types of Rekka cancels. The first one being the one that I think most people ask about, the question I get the most often, is inputting Rekka into another Rekka. And this is definitely the hardest. I've already messed it up a couple times, as you can see. This one's definitely very difficult, and we're going to talk about that one in a little bit. But first, I want to mention the other type of Rekka cancel, which is definitely the easier type, which is just Rekka into any other special move. In this example, I'm going to be talking about doing Rekka into Sword Toss. It applies to any other special move, though. It's pretty much the same regardless. And you can do these Rekka cancels from either Rekka 1 or 2. Most frequently, though, you're going to be doing it from Rekka 2 because that's usually where most of the combos are going to come from. So for the sake of practicing, if you're trying to get used to it, I would practice doing Rekka cancels off of Rekka 2 because that is the most frequent one that you're going to be doing them off of. Before we get into this part, I do want to mention something that is highly, highly important in this situation, almost required to be honest, is make sure you have a dash macro button set up somewhere on your controller or your stick or whatever controller you use. You're going to want to make sure that you're using a dash macro. It is almost essential to this. I don't know how you would honestly do these consistently doing a 6/6 input. Most people already have the dash macro set up, but if you don't, make sure you have one. Inputting these Rekka cancels for the traditional Rekkas, where if you're doing Rekka into any other special move, is generally pretty easy. It's not very difficult to do. All you're going to have to do is input your Rekkas, press the dash macro, and then do the other special move input. So in this case, I'm using Sword Toss. It's really nothing super special. You just want to make sure you're doing your inputs quickly after inputting the dash. And thankfully, for most special moves, you can just kind of buffer this. So you'll kind of see in my inputs, I'm inputting things like very quickly. In fact, I'm doing it too quickly right now. This one is not too much of an execution requirement. You just have to make sure you're pressing the dash macro and then you input everything else very quickly afterwards. Now, the reason why this is easy and the other ones are not easy is that you can buffer most of your special moves from Rekka. So if you're just trying to do Rekka into Sword Toss, you can start inputting the motion for the follow-up special move very early into the Rekka animation. So practicing this one is a good place to start because it is definitely the easiest and it'll get you an idea of the timing for the Rekka cancels. And you'll start to understand why doing Rekka into Rekka again is considered a little bit more difficult when you realize the fact that you can buffer it for your normal special moves. So with that said, we need to talk about doing Rekka into Rekka. Again, you can do this from either Rekka, it doesn't matter. I suggest practicing it off of Rekka 2 because it's the most common one you're going to do this from. Now, the reason why doing Rekka into Rekka again, like going back to Rekka 1, is difficult is because you cannot buffer it. You cannot buffer Rekka into another Rekka 1. So if I just do Rekka, it's just gonna give me Rekka 2, right? Rekka 2 is a special move. The game prioritizes doing the second Rekka over canceling back into Rekka 1. It might sound a little confusing, but essentially what this means is that unlike with the other Rekka cancels, you cannot buffer this one. You have to make sure the inputs for this are done within the 2-frame window that you can cancel the dash from. So for this one, you're going to need a different input technique. And there's a couple of things you're gonna want to pay attention to when you're inputting it. So if you look at my inputs over on the left side of the screen, what I am doing is I am doing the second Rekka, and I'm usually waiting for Ram to finish putting her foot up into the air. And then I'm going to input the quarter circle back, and then I'm going to press the dash macro and P at the same time. So your input should look like that. So it's going to be down, down, back, back. You're going to see the dash macro get pressed, and then immediately after the dash macro, you're seeing me press the P button. You essentially need to roll your fingers from the dash button to the P button to get this to work, because that is the 2-frame window. The input interpreter over there shows you each frame of your inputs, so you'll know you're doing it correctly when those inputs are back to back. And usually you'll really know that you're doing it appropriately because the dash macro will still be held when you're pressing the P button. So that's like what you need to really pay attention to when you're trying to do these Rekka cancels. Again, it is not easy, so don't feel bad if it takes you a while to get this down. Ram players, even all the top Ram players, still drop these sometimes in matches. These are definitely not super easy by any means. Now, the other thing is that some people will do the input correctly, but they don't understand the timing behind all of it. A very common mistake that will happen, if you ever are trying to do Rekka cancels and you get Rekka 3, or whatever the next Rekka would be, you're doing your input too early into the motion, and it's just registering it as the follow-up Rekka. So that's how you know that you're doing it too early. If you're doing it too late, you're going to get Rekka into an empty dash cancel, and there's going to be no special move or anything. That's how you know you're doing your input too late, because when you do it this way, it's way too difficult to input the dash and then do the whole 214p motion after the dash macro. I did technically just do it right there. You can do it this way, but it is way harder this way. I do not recommend it. So those are like the basic concepts behind getting your Rekka cancels. The best way to practice these are just set the dummy to block and then just kind of practice doing them over and over. Now we need to talk about what you use these for, which is generally going to be what people refer to as Rekka Loops. And these are very fun. These are Ram's most fun combos, if you ask me. And they're essentially just looping her Rekkas into themselves over and over. For extreme corner carry, massive meter gain, it does tons of damage, as you just saw there. And this allows you to convert a lot of things. You can get these off of even 2K2D. You can get 1 rep of a Rekka loop just like that, which is good. There's a lot of different situations that you can use these to just maximize your damage, your meter gain, and your corner carry. These are pretty much just doing your Rekka cancels, but you really need to make sure your timing is good on them. And this is a good way to practice Rekka cancels. Like what I'll do is I'll just go into training mode and I'll just do 2H into 3 loops of Rekkas, just like that. So I'll just go into training mode every day and I'll do that for like 5 or 10 minutes just to make sure I have the timing down. You can do this off all sorts of starters. Like I said, you can do it off of 2K, you can do it off of 5K. There's tons of different starters you can do it off of. Again, when it comes to trying to do this in a combo, the main thing that I try to pay attention to is specifically inputting it right about now when you see Ram's foot finishing the animation from the second Rekka. This is kind of your tell to be like, okay, this is when I need to input the rest of the move. Because if you input it any earlier, then you're essentially trying to buffer the input. And like I was saying, you can't buffer Rekka cancel back into Rekka 1. So doing it any earlier won't work. Also important to note, in almost every case you're doing Rekka loops, you need to make sure that you are getting the enhanced version of Rekka 2, which you can tell you're getting the enhanced version by whether the streak around her foot is white. This is an unenhanced Rekka, and this is an enhanced Rekka. This one will launch higher. You get that by just delaying the Rekka a little bit. So if I just input it immediately, it's going to be a normal Rekka, and if I delay it a little bit, it'll be an enhanced Rekka. And that's basically it. That's how you do Rekka loops, and that's how you do Rekka cancels. Again, I suggest just kind of focusing on doing the other special moves, because you can still use those for combos. You can still do Rekka 1, enhance Rekka 2 into Sword Toss. That's still a combo on most characters. A lot of situations you can just do that as a basic combo, and it's pretty good. Thank you, Diaphone. I appreciate it. Y'all should listen to Diaphone in the chat. He's a genius. Very, very smart individual right there. All right, that's pretty much it for this video. This is just a basic breakdown of how to do Rekka cancels and some applications for them in combos and whatnot. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask down in the comments below, or you can come to my Twitch and hang out with all of us over on the squad. Chat, say hi to the YouTubers over there. You can also join our community Discord and ask questions there. We have tons of RAM players and not RAM players. If you want to come chat with us, you can find a link to that in the description below. Come hang out with us. We're having tons of fun in the Discord all the time. Yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.